Hi Yogi, and welcome to another Slow Flow with me, Oceana. In this particular class, we'll be heading into our fourth and final week exploring the more restorative aspects of yin yoga. So as we have been doing, we're adding a couple of extra props here today. In this case, I've got myself a bolster, 2 bricks, as well as a block, and I've also draped a blanket on top of my yoga mat, which is very optional but just gives that extra layer of coziness to our practice today. If you're missing any of these items, then I will link a video here for you that's going to show you how to easily substitute them. I will say today, even though it's an all levels class, I do expect you to have just a little bit of knowledge of yin practice. And of course, if you've done the previous couple of weeks, then you have ample amounts of knowledge. But that's really going to just allow us to dive into these postures and settle in a little bit faster, which gives us an opportunity to really explore our internal landscape. So what I mean by that is the different thoughts, maybe feelings, emotions, sensations that arise as we stay in these postures a little bit longer than we have previously done. And I will sort of really focus on talking you through how to work through these different things, that stuff that arises when we stay in silence or stillness for a little bit of extra time. And for a lot of yogis, including myself, this is sort of the first time that we begin to explore these early stages of what really constitutes meditation practice. So yin is this wonderful gateway into meditation for a lot of yogis who feel a little bit of trepidation about meditating. And, you know, I'm definitely in that camp of people, or I used to be, for sure. So hopefully you'll enjoy the practice today, a little bit of a different flavor of yin. And when you're ready, we will be starting in a kneeling position, so you can join me there. So we'll begin today's practice in toe squat. All you really need to do to get there is briefly lean forward, tuck under your toes, and gradually from there shift your body weight back so that you end up sitting on top of your heels. And you could have the hands resting with the palms down on top of your thighs, which tends to feel a little bit more grounding. Or you could place the hands with the palms facing towards the ceiling, which tends to represent a slightly more open-minded, receptive state of being. So once you arrive, if you can, close the eyes completely or just let your gaze soften towards a focal point that's a little bit further away from you on the floor. Let your peripheral vision widen. Gradually let the breath soften and drop towards the belly as you breathe in. Let the shoulders relax down the back. And let your mind begin to focus on the physical sensations in the body. So here, particularly for most of us, the sensations will be focused around the toes and the soles of the feet. That deep stretch happening there. And if you can, then this might be a good time to set an intention for the duration of your practice. And you might have something that you're really particularly already thinking about working towards. Or you might simply allow the intention to stay present within the four corners of your yoga mat. To truly allow your attention to rest within your own self, within your being. Not to be diverted by the mind towards things that have not happened yet or things that happened in the past. Slowly on your next inhale, lean forward to untuck the toes. Come back on top of your heels so that you can give yourself a little bit of a counter stretch here. So you could place the hands either sides of the knees and lean into the hands to pick up the knees and give yourself a little bit of a deeper ankle stretch here, pressing down through the tops of the feet, lengthening those muscles. And possibly as you lean forward, giving the tops of the feet a little bit of a tap against the floor, releasing any final bits of tension here. And from here, we'll slowly prepare ourselves to come into our first sort of longer held posture, which will be saddle pose. And for a lot of people, saddle sort of fills them with trepidation because it is very deep front body opener and it can be quite compressive on the knees. So I'm going to give you a couple of options here with that in mind. So the way I've set this up here is slightly more forgiving already. So what you could do is incline the bolster at any height, so you could even rest this against the wall, which gives you a lot more options. If you're using yoga bricks, again, you can set them at any particular height, so they could be really tall or a little bit lower. And similarly, if you know you have sort of tight knees or the knee joint is a little bit sensitive, you will want to have at least a block or possibly several blankets underneath your sitting bones, which will reduce the sort of angle and give you a little bit more freedom for the blood to flow into the lower legs, so you don't end up with pins of needles and what have you. So personally, I know my saddle pose fairly well, so I'm going to go for a slightly lower version where the bolster is going to be just on top of the floor, but I will keep the block underneath the sitting bones because that's just my personal preference. So you can sort of play around with this a little bit if you've never done it before, but essentially we're going to face away from the bolster. If we're using this block, then we will place our sitting bones on top of it, and we'll want the heels either sides of the hips with all 10 toes pointing directly backwards. The bolster wants to be fairly close to your sacrum, and from there you slowly recline over the bolster, and you can allow the palms again to face up towards the ceiling or to rest the hands on top of the soles of the feet here. I personally prefer to have the palms facing up because it allows the shoulders to really drop away and gives you this lovely opening along the front of the chest. Now gradually here, really allow the breath to expand the front of the body as you inhale. Feel that deep stretch along the belly, the abdomen, the fronts of your thighs, the ribs, as well as the chest, this whole front body line that is lengthening as you breathe in. And the whole back body line softening towards the props beneath you as you exhale. And possibly here there's already slight challenges to the intention that you set at the beginning of your practice. If you're trying to particularly stay focused and stay present, maybe the mind has already started to take you away to different places, different things, filling your brain with stuff that either has happened or hasn't yet happened. So notice immediately as you come into the posture what's going on. Where is the mind drawn to? Is it particularly focused on physical sensations? Could those sensations help you actually stay a little bit more present? So if there's a sort of compression of the lower back or in the knee joint, is there a possibility that instead of immediately reacting to that physical sensation, as long as it's not pain, as long as there's not a sharp sensation, if it's a sort of duller, softer feeling of physical either stretch or a dull sort of ache, a pulling of muscles moving in opposite directions, lengthening away from one another, then it might actually be a sensation that you can let your mind rest on. Notice how that sensation is constantly changing with each breath. And possibly over time, as you allow your mind to rest on these physical aspects of the body, you might find that the sensations actually lessen. Body begins to soften over time, relaxing into the pose, releasing. But usually the mind then is simply drawn towards other thoughts. So notice where the mind wanders to. For the last few moments here, there's the option to deepen the posture. Of course, if this already feels very strong, then you should stay where you are and see if you can let your mind continue to be present. But if the body has softened into it, you could take your arms over the head, grabbing hold of your elbows and allowing the front of the body to open a little bit more deeply, working into the pectoral muscles as well as the arms and shoulders, finding a little bit more length and openness through the front of the body. And allowing your last few breaths here to really soften into this particular moment and simply be. Gradually to come out of this, if your arms are lifted, place them back on top of your feet. Tuck your chin in towards the chest to lift the head, and gradually here walk the hands behind you for support so that you can come up into a kneeling position. And here we'll simply turn ourselves around to face towards the bolster, and we'll come into child's pose as a counter stretch. So some of you, especially if you have yourself set up with a bolster on top of the bricks, you might prefer to keep it that way and simply place the bolster between the knees, reclining over it here with the palms facing towards the ceiling. And you might like to turn the head one way or the other. I can sort of give you a halfway warning so that you could even out the neck and turn the head in the opposite direction. So this is really just a little bit of a release for the lower back. You can separate the knees a comfortable distance and really let the front of the body relax into it. Possibly at this point turning the head in the opposite direction for some of you. So giving just a gentle stretch to the side of the neck as we turn the head from one side to the other, and noticing any particular differences and imbalances throughout these muscles that surround the head, which often tells us a lot about what we're doing with the head for most of the day. Might be leaning a little bit more towards one side or the other. Now, gradually from here, remove the bolster by coming up onto the knees, and we'll add a little bit of a twist to this child's pose. So you can walk the hands forward again, and we'll start by taking the right arm underneath the left armpit. You can walk the left fingertips in front of you to even look underneath towards the right thumb. And possibly here closing the eyes, resting on top of the right side of the head. And if that doesn't comfortably come to the floor, then you could grab your block or a brick, maybe even the bolster, to support the side of the head so that you can really relax the muscles in the neck. Notice the areas where the stretch is a little bit more apparent. So maybe one side of the lower back feels a little bit more tense than the other. Maybe one shoulder feels a little bit tighter than the other. Could you possibly consider, as you exhale, really sending the exhalation into these areas to allow them to soften and release into the stretch? Now gradually we'll press into the left hand to unravel the right arm and reach it all the way forward so that we can turn to the opposite side. Left arm, this time we'll slide underneath the right, and again we could rest the side of the head here. Maybe walk the right fingertips a little bit further forward so that we're looking underneath the armpit towards the opposite side of the mat. Allowing the sitting bones to be heavy. And although it probably feels most natural to really send the breath into that right rib cage, see if you can still direct a little bit of the breath towards the left side, which is being compressed. So the breath stays even throughout the body, throughout the ribs and chest and belly. Slowly press into your right hand to unravel yourself and come all the way to sit on your sitting bones. So you can slip the feet out to one side, and we'll make our way into shoelace pose. So I would suggest that all of us sit on top of either a blanket or possibly a block if you've got it, and a couple of different options for shoelace here. So you could start with the right leg in front of you. The left leg goes over the top with the foot firmly planted on the floor. And if the foot doesn't quite reach, you can always place one of your yoga bricks underneath it for support. Now, if you do want to go a little bit deeper, then there's the option to slip your right heel towards the opposite sitting bone. And if there's absolutely no knee issues and your sitting bones are still firmly planted on top of whatever you're sitting on, you could stack your knees on top of each other here and have your shin bones almost in one straight line in front of you. So this is your full shoelace pose. And we'll start with a little bit of a side bend by planting the left hand maybe a foot or two, maybe sort of 20 centimeters away from the left hip, reaching the right fingertips over the head. And as we do that, we press a little bit more into that bottom hand to spin the chest open, really reaching right side of the rib cage towards the ceiling and grounding down through the right sitting bone. So those two parts of the body are moving in opposite direction, creating a little bit more space within the rib cage. And possibly here, if it feels heavy to hold the hand, you might not want to whack your plants, but you could rest the hand behind the head and allow the head to gently lean back. Finding the full depth of your breath here once you arrive. And again, is there a little bit of a possibility that the breath is still moving equally into both of your ribs, keeping the whole of the torso expansive and open? And where is the mind? Is the mind drawn to any particular aspects of the body, any particular parts of the body? Is it moving towards the breath? Or are there any sort of thoughts that are crossing your mind that you might be able to notice and follow along the trail of those thoughts until you have an idea of what they're really about? What is taking your mind there? Gently here, lift through the center of the chest to come into an upright position. If your top right arm is still lifted, keep it there. Grab hold of the elbow with your left arm. And if that's happened, of course, you can always hold on to the wrist or anywhere along the forearm instead if you don't quite catch the elbow. But if you did catch the elbow, maybe you could squeeze it a little bit more towards the back of the head and allow your right hand to rest between the shoulder blades. Over time, as we stay here for a couple of rounds of breath, possibly walking the left arm a little bit more towards the upper arm. Keeping the chest lifted all the way from the sitting bones through the central axis of the spine, growing a little bit taller with each inhale. With each exhale, softening the shoulders a little bit more down the back. Optional here to lean gently forwards for the last couple of rounds of breath, feeling this deep opening in the lower back towards the hips. And possibly with each breath working a little bit deeper into that fold without losing the length of your spine or the connection between the arms. Gradually, as you inhale, lift yourself back up, release the grip of your arms. Just for a moment, give the shoulders a couple of rolls back and forwards. Release any remaining tension there. And gradually here we'll simply swap sides by changing over to the other configuration of the legs. So you could start with the left leg in front of you, possibly even the knee bent, and you can support the knee with a bolster or brick underneath it. If the leg is straight, your right foot could go across the thigh so that you can plant the foot either on the floor, or again you might use something to lift the foot a little bit higher off the ground, making these accommodations for whatever's going on in the hip joints as well as the knees. And if you're going a little bit deeper, left heel will move towards the opposite sitting bone and you still have the foot on the floor. Or the sort of final option is to stack the knees, have the shins parallel to one another. So that sort of when you're looking down, there's almost a straight line from one heel to the other. The toes can flex. And gradually from here, again, we start with this little side bend. So right hand walks just a touch away from us. The left arm could sort of stay leaning down, resting on top of the left hip, or possibly reaching over the head as you spin the chest open and look up. And if it's comfortable, again, close the eyes here. Really notice the immediate sensations that are present for you. Where does the body feel this posture happening? Gradually pressing a little bit more into that bottom hand to really ground your left sitting bone towards the floor, reaching the left fingertips in the opposite direction, and possibly allowing the top hand to support the back of the head here, so that you can lean the head back and think a little bit more about reaching through your left elbow. And over the last few moments here, seeing if you can keep the breath equally moving into both ribs, softening a little bit more into the posture. Gradually, as you inhale, lift through your top arm to come back into an upright position. Again, keep your left arm as it is. If possible, reach your right hand around, maybe catch the wrist anywhere along the forearm or all the way to the elbow. Try to approximate the last time we were here so that we're keeping the body fairly even between both sides. But of course, if there are strong imbalances, we have to make adjustments for that. So if you do catch the elbow, then let your left hand rest between the shoulder blades along the trapezius muscles. Find again the weight of your body in the sitting bones, which for some of us might mean actually leaning a little bit further back so that we can really ground the sitting bones down. And from there, grow a little bit taller through the top of the head, reaching towards the sky above you. So create this long line through the central axis of the body. And really imagine the body growing and lengthening beyond just yourself. So could the tailbone drop a little bit more towards the earth, so there's almost a sense of rooting down. And maybe the crown of the head could reach towards the clouds above you. Again, the option here to keep the hips grounded, but gradually let the spine lengthen forwards. So the front of the chest moves a little bit closer towards your thighs or the knees. Without losing or rounding, you're still keeping the front of the body open, but working a little bit deeper into the stretch of the glutes, the opening at the back of the hips, possibly with each exhale folding a little bit closer towards the legs. Slowly on an inhale, lift yourself back up. Release the arms. And this time lean across to your right side to extract both legs in front of you. Have a moment with the feet about shoulder distance, hands behind you, fingertips pointing away to have a little windscreen wiper of the legs, moving from side to side, releasing any last tension. Might be helpful to move off your block here, otherwise you might slide off anyway. And gradually here we'll set ourselves up for our final posture. So we'll make this a side bend, but it is a reclining supported side bend. So essentially we'll use the bolster here to drape our rib cage over, and you might like to have a brick, maybe two, possibly just your yoga block nearby so that you can support the head here. Once you're ready, simply come to lie on the right side of your hip and adjust the bolster so that it's directly towards the lower part of your rib cage and sort of supports all the way over towards the, possibly all the way towards the armpit. I had to think about that one for a second. The right arm could reach in front of you here. And the option is to lean on the elbow and actually simply support the side of the head. So this is a slightly more forgiving option. You can play around with where you place the knees. So if the legs are straight, it's usually a slightly deeper version. If the knees are bent, that can allow you to ground the hip a little bit more firmly and give you a very supportive, maybe a slightly more restorative option for this posture. And of course, if holding your hand here feels a little bit tiring, you could place a brick on the toe setting underneath the head instead, or adjust the brick to a lower setting. Possibly, personally, I think I'll use the block, which will be a little bit softer, a little bit more forgiving. And the top arm could lightly bend at the elbow so that it can rest towards your lower back, which gives you quite a deep opening along the front of the shoulder. Or you might let the arm come all the way over your head, so that again you have this similar posture to when we did our child's pose, and that gives you a slightly deeper side bend here. So pick your poison here, really make sure that whatever you've chosen is a restful option, that you feel balanced and supported in, able to really let the mind come to rest and stillness here. Slowly to make our way out of this, bring your left hand in front of your face here, press into the fingertips and lift the head, slowly coming all the way into a seated position. And you might simply roll on to your opposite side here. I'll obviously change around so that I can keep facing the camera, and simply move all the props to the other direction, which you might like to do as well, because it just means you can still face the screen without moving it. So again, once you're ready here, drape the rib cage on top of your bolster, reach the left hand in front of you in the opposite, sort of in the direction away from your body, I would say. And you can always adjust your block underneath the head, or if you've got a brick. Otherwise, of course, if you're using the hand, then you want to bend at the elbow and make that hand feel supportive for the head. So playing around a little bit with the different possibilities of where that hand could really rest underneath the head. And the right arm either can dangle towards the lower back again, or possibly reaching over the head to deepen that side stretch. Once all of that is established, you might adjust the position of your legs and knees, maybe bending them a little bit closer or moving the feet a little bit further away from you, making sure that whatever you've chosen is a position that you can truly settle into and let the body come to rest. Possibly noticing the initial sensations that attract your attention. Seeing if you can tap into the movement of the breath. Noticing all the different areas that are affected by your breathing. And possibly truly connecting to that softening sensation of the exhalation. Noticing whether all the areas that are present in your mind as you inhale, all the areas that are affected by the inhalation, are also affected by the exhalation. And again, if the mind is really busy with different narratives here, see if you could allow the mind to come to focus and rest on your breathing. And maybe it's helpful again to count the breath. So as you inhale, you softly, gently say to yourself 10. Exhaling to yourself the number 9. Inhaling for 8. Exhaling for 7. And again continuing to count down the breath until you might get to 1 and decide you can let go of the counting, or continuing on to another round. Slowly to release here. Again, bring the right hand this time in front of your eyes. Press into the right hand to rise up to a comfortable seated position. Remove all of your props, although you might like to have your block underneath your head later on. So you could place that at the top of the mat and gradually from there come onto your backside. Place the block underneath your head if you would like, or you could grab a pillow for under the head. Bring the knees towards the chest and have a brief moment to roll from one side to the other, possibly allowing the head to rock in the opposite direction to the knees. And we'll close our practice here with happy baby. So the options here, you'll have the knees separated, the soles of the feet pointing towards the ceiling, and you could grab hold of the backs of the knees, possibly anywhere along the outside of your lower leg. If you catch the ankle, or you might even get all the way to the outer edges of your feet. From there, there's a sense that as you relax the shoulder blades towards the floor, you might be able to draw the knees a little bit closer past the rib cage. But ideally, you want to prioritize allowing the shoulders as well as the tailbone to be fully grounded. So the whole of the spine lengthens towards the floor beneath you. And over time, as the hips open a little bit more, gravity allows the back of the body to connect a little bit more firmly into the ground. We create a little bit more space at the back of the body. And allow the mind to truly settle in here. So if it's possible, just rest as you are. If you need a little bit more guidance, come back to the counting. Gently, gently let the knees bend. Hug the knees towards yourself. Gradually here, let the right arm come over your head to roll onto the right side of the body, with the left arm supporting you in front of the chest. Possibly even close the right nostril, direct the breath through the left side to make that a little bit more dominant again. And eventually press into your left arm to come up to a comfortable seated position. Bring the palms to touch in front of the chest and bow the forehead towards the fingertips. Let this last moment of practice be an opportunity for you to plant a good intention that guides this focused energy that you cultivate in your yoga practice out into the real world, towards the people you love, the things you're working towards. Give yourself a focused perspective. The light in me recognizes the light in you. Namaste, yogi. Once again, thank you so much for joining me in today's practice. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, if you did, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and leave me a comment down below to let me know how you felt after this particular class. If you have any questions, suggestions or feedback, that all goes in there as well. And of course, if you want to find me anywhere else in the meantime, then I will leave you my social media links down in the video description so that you can find me anywhere else. And I hope to see you back on your yoga mat very soon. Thank you so much. Bye.